Hello and welcome back to the returning viewers, and a warm welcome to any new viewers. The subject of this video is going to be storytelling from my life experience in terms of letting go. And I've been trained in hypnotherapy via the Rapid Transformational Therapy School. So this is about tapping into your subconscious mind and figuring out what beliefs you may have formed in your childhood that are then informing decisions and actions that you're making as an adult. And this is where logic, our rational brain, might be thinking, this is the way, this is the right way that I need to sort of tackle a certain situation or circumstance. But even though logically, rationally, I know what I need to do, somehow something is holding me back, is blocking me from taking that action. Either I'm procrastinating, or I'm avoiding, or I'm actually filled with fear and anxiety and stress, and that is hindering me from being able to take that action. And the reality is that's usually because it's linked to emotions that have been stored in your subconscious mind. So as part of my training, I have done extensive therapy work with fellow students and then qualified RTT practitioners. So this video is about me exploring some of the work that I've done over the past 18 months and things that I've become aware of, so blind spots that I had, and then I was able to, through understanding them, to be able to let them go and replace them with more empowering beliefs that were able, that have sort of created the foundation for me to take the actions that I am taking, that I have taken since having done the therapy work. Now, this is ongoing work that I'm actually doing. So over the past few weeks, I've been looking at inner child work, and that's tapping into some kind of further down layers. But the therapy at the subconscious level through the RTT sessions worked very, very fast and have long-lasting effects in my life personally. So I thought I would share that. So for those of you that have followed my channel previously, this is where I want to create a tribe community of being heard, being seen, being brave to make changes in our lives, and then to enable us to be free, to thrive, to have the most fun and enjoyment in this human life experience that we're going through. My name is Tanya, I'm 52 years old, I live on the east coast of Scotland, and through this channel I'm sharing my personal development journey, tools and techniques, hints and tips through my coaching and therapy practice, what I've learned through my training, my extensive reading, and my ongoing personal development journey, as well as working with clients, because that's the best way to sort of figure out what works, what doesn't work, what can be tweaked and adjusted. So within this video, as I said, this is the kind of Friday installment of storytelling, and hopefully within me relaying the transformation journey that I've gone in the past 18 months in particular, it'll start maybe addressing some kind of concerns that you may have around hypnotherapy, and does it really work, and what are the kind of benefits, and it's just bringing a little bit more to life that experience from my perspective. Okay, so for those of you that know my story, I sort of moved over to Greece at the age of 5 with my father, mother, and my younger sister. And the whole purpose of us moving there was for me to start school in Greece. My dad is of Greek descent, and he always intended for us to go back prior to me starting school. And when we arrived in Greece, we arrived in the village where my dad originally comes from, which is up in Halkidiki on the mainland. And within that environment, I was going to be left in the village for a year so I could go to preschool, kindergarten, so I could learn to read and write in Greek prior to me starting school at the age of 6, because in Greece you start school at the age of 6 rather than the age of 5, which is the norm here in the UK. So that was the decision made prior to us moving over to Greece. me as a 5-year-old, not knowing any kind of Greek, going into the village environment, I picked up the language fairly quickly. But obviously at the age of 5, you're not going to sit down and have a conversation with your parents where they're going to explain exactly why you're going to be left in the village, yet they are going to go to the big city and they're going to take your younger sister with you. So this is where in my experience, all I sort of knew is one day my dad, mum and sister were with me in the village, and then the next day they were gone and I was left in the village with my grandmother and with my aunt, so my dad's mum and my dad's younger sister. And I felt rejected and I felt abandoned. And this is where my resilience and my ability to reframe things changed that experience, where I would have felt sad and hurt because they left and they didn't take me, because I felt, well, I've clearly done something wrong that I'm not going with them and they are leaving me here. I couldn't see the bigger picture at that point in time. But my resilience made me reframe the situation and I just got on with it. It wasn't that I was like sulking and being difficult as a child. I quickly adjusted to the fact that I was in the village and I just needed to get on with things. However, there was beliefs that were being created that there must be something that I've done that wasn't good enough, and as a result, then my innate need to feel loved, to feel connected, to feel praised and recognized by my caregivers, by my gran, by my aunt, and then by my parents when they did visit back to the village, because they didn't just leave me for a year and then just came back. They would come back over every few kind of weeks to sort of check in with me. And as a result, I created this kind of belief that in order for me to get that love, the connectedness, I needed to people please. I needed to meet the expectations that other placed upon me. Now, there is a terminology within psychology which is learned helplessness, where a child doesn't understand why things have changed and then they internalize that. It's not that their caregivers have rejected them and abandoned them. It was more the fact that, oh, you must have done something wrong to result in that outcome, that you have been rejected, that you have been abandoned, and you internalize it, and then you try and find ways to be able to then get that attention and the praise and the recognition that you're actually seeking in the love and affection. So that was patterns of behavior that then I introduced. I became a people pleaser, an overgiver. I had no boundaries, and whenever someone told me to do something, I just quietly and obediently followed their instruction. I didn't question. If I felt threatened that they were going to withhold love and affection, and they would give me the silent treatment, then I would quickly comply. My innate kind of age-appropriate behaviour would be to try and challenge, to try and figure out where there were boundaries. And when you clearly realise that there were no boundaries, that things could change from one minute to the next, because the way that the parenting from my grandmother and my aunt versus the parenting from my mum and dad, it was distinctly different. So it became a bit confusing as to what is the right thing and what is not. So then it was much easier to just obey every instruction from an adult, whether you agreed with it or didn't. So you just suppress the emotions down. And this is something that, this rejection is something that sort of came up with as part of one of the scenes in part of the hypnotherapy session that I was actually undertaking fairly early on, when I was trying to understand, why have I got this dysfunctional relationship with food, and why sometimes I feel that I'm in control and I can actually eat food, no problem at all, I'm making healthy, nutritious choices, and then other times I'm sort of wanting to do the binge eating, rewarding myself by eating processed and healthy food. Why am I not making the kind of healthier choices when I know that my body is going to feel better, I'm going to have better energy levels? So as part of that work, this is one of the scenes where I felt abandoned, I felt rejected. And as a result, I wanted to people please. And one of the ways that my relatives in Greece sort of reflected their love and affection was by feeding you. So you felt sometimes that you were being overfed, or you were fed a lot of like sweets, because a lot of Greeks have a sweet tooth. And as a result, I was always like, relatives would be baking big tray bakes and big slices of baklava or of other different types of desserts in Greece, and you would actually have large portions of them. And then you started associating that connection that you're being loved through food. So if you want to be loved and retain that love, if someone's giving you a big slice of cake, of course you're going to eat it. You're not going to refuse that, because then you're going to dissatisfy those that are giving you the food. So it created that kind of sort of unhealthy behavior in me as a result, like as an adult, but it all stemmed back from my kind of childhood. Another example was where anxiety isn't an emotion that I've actually felt a lot as an adult, but as I was heading probably in my mid-40s and starting to develop some of the kind of perimenopausal symptoms, anxiety was something that I started feeling, and I started becoming very hypervigilant, and my kind of overthinking was just spiraling out of control at times. And when I wanted to figure out, well, why am I getting this anxiety feeling? Why am I like sitting in a Teams call with work colleagues that I had been on a call with them the day before, and then all of a sudden I would feel anxious and extremely nervous, where my train of thought would be impacted, and then it started making me doubt myself and my abilities to do my job, and the imposter syndrome was starting to come through. So when I did some work on perimenopausal symptoms, because I was very keen, as in light of all the benefits that RTT I've actually seen firsthand myself and with clients and with people that I had been training with. And there was so much success in terms of dealing with a lot of the perimenopausal symptoms: sleep, bladder control, and anxiety, brain fog, lots of other kind of symptoms that were actually being relieved through hypnotherapy. And I thought, oh, this is absolutely brilliant. I really wanted to come off HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy, and I decided that I'm going to work with a fellow colleague of mine, and we did a couple of sessions. And in that first session, we were tackling that feeling of anxiety, because I didn't want to come off HRT and then start feeling those anxious kind of feelings again, where it would start impacting my train of thought, my concentration, my focus, and potentially push me back into suicidal ideation, which I certainly never wanted to go back into that mind frame. So we tackled the anxiety, and it turned out when we went to the scenes back into my childhood, it all stemmed at the age of 7, where there were earthquakes that took place in Greece. So in 1979, there were really oh God, what the word that I'm trying to find is really strong earthquakes. And what it resulted is a lot of buildings ended up collapsing in Thessaloniki, where my parents and I resided. So at the age of 7, I was living with my parents at that point, and we were living in a high-rise building. I want to say we were on the 6th floor. It was high up. When there is an earthquake, you can't use the elevator, so you have to use the stairs. It happened at night time, so I was asleep, and so was my sister. My parents felt the movement of the building, so they woke up, and then they woke us up. Now, with me being 7, they wanted me to get out of the building as quick as possible, get something on my feet, and just start walking down the stairs. So we had to get down several flights of stairs. And as we got into the actual, out of the flat and starting to walk down the flights of stairs, there was this massive noise and commotion because everyone in the block of flats was doing exactly the same. Everyone was actually panicked and anxious, and the Greek way of responding to a stressful situation is the voices start increasing in volume, people start screaming, shouting, and it's because that is their way of communicating, of trying to get their kind of point across. So there was a lot of shouting. I had been disrupted from my sleep, and then all of a sudden, all this screaming, shouting, we're having to get out of this building. And then we get into the car and then we drive to the airport, because that was the one area in the city where there was like lots of fields around, so there was no high-rise buildings, so there was not any danger of any kind of debris sort of falling down as a result of the kind of earth moving. And that sense of anxiety in me and that hypervigilance was because when you start hearing the kind of noise and all that kind of stuff happening, your brain sort of like makes that connection. Oh, I'm going back, I'm reliving that kind of anxious emotion from the age of 7, but now I'm in my mid-40s and I'm on a Teams call, and rather than me feeling calm and able to sort of get my thoughts clear, when there is people sort of like disagreeing and there is a lot of kind of noise, then it was actually triggering that feeling of anxiety within me. So as a result of the RTT kind of session and identifying that's where my anxiety actually stemmed from, we were able to sort of like reframe that, and rather than me sort of holding on to this, when it gets loud, when it gets noisy, I need to be hyper vigilant and I need to start feeling that I'm in a fight or flight kind of situation, when in actual fact, becoming aware of your thoughts, becoming aware of your feelings, accepting them and then articulating them, and then challenging, are they valid? Am I really genuinely, is my life being threatened at this moment in time? And if the answer is no, it's not, then it's about either resetting your optic nerve to bring safety within your body, and in so doing, you can actually relax and start thinking in a more kind of rational way rather than being panic stricken, so that anxiety can be sort of reduced down. So that was another kind of big area for me that was like revelationary, to understand that that is where the anxiety actually stemmed from. And then we were able to reframe it. And now I am been off HRT since the 25th of January 2024, and my symptoms haven't, like the anxiety hasn't come back. My sleep is much more improved. My bladder control is fantastic compared to what it had been for the previous 5 years. And there's lots of other kind of symptoms that have sort of like eliminated entirely. So it just proves that you don't have to go on medication to resolve physical symptoms that you may be experiencing if the connection is linked to beliefs that you formed in your childhood. So this is where RTT is absolutely really, really powerful. And the third kind of experience that I want to sort of share was motion sickness. So at the age of 6, when I had been in the village, then I moved over with my parents to the city, to Thessaloniki, and there was probably about an hour of a drive between the city and the village. And my dad would actually drive every few weekends. We would go back over to the village to visit my grandmother and my aunt and the other relatives that we had over there. And this is where my dad would be driving very fast because he wanted to get to the village as quick as possible, having 2 children within the back seat, and he just wanted to get there to start enjoying the weekend. Now, for me, the roads were fairly twisty because back then they didn't have the big waterways or the kind of straight roads that they've actually created now. It was a mountainous area to sort of like navigate from the village, from the city to the village. And there was a lot of car crashes that have happened. So in Greece, what they do is on the sides of the roads where there has been a fatal accident, they usually set up a little memorial altar to be able to honor the deceased, and then the family can actually go and visit that because that is the place where their loved one actually deceased, or the cliff upon which the car fell down or the bus fell down or the truck or however, in whatever vehicle they were. And you could see all these little, every kind of sharp corner, you would see all these little altars. And that would just also be something that I would be like, all these people have died traveling down this road. So the speed at which we were actually moving was making me very kind of, I wouldn't say nervous and anxious, it was just making me feel really uneasy. And this is where I would ask, can we slow down? And this is where, if the adults are paying attention and they're really listening, so you have to be heard, then they would sort of slow down. But when people are just caught up in the single vision, they want to just get from A to B and they want to get there as fast as possible, they don't listen, they don't hear. And not being heard and not being seen as a result, what do you do to get attention? You end up throwing up. And then by throwing up, then the necessity is for the car to slow down, because now we need to take care of this child that is just thrown up, because now the parent is actually starting to listen and take the appropriate action at the time. And this is something that I actually did several times. So whenever we were actually having these journeys from the city to the village, I would end up throwing up if we were going too fast. Eventually, my dad would, when I started getting to the point where you're going too fast, can you slow down? He would actually then start listening and he would slow down the driving. Now, it had nothing to do with the actual speed and with the actual car. It was the fact that I felt out of control, and me not being in control of the speed at which we were going and the pace at which decisions were being made in our lives. 1 minute I'm in the village, the next minute I'm in the city, the next minute we're going from the city to the village. There was just constantly this upheaval that was happening, and being a child, you're not necessarily being told, you're just being told this is what's happening and you just need to comply. And this is where becoming obedient and trying to people please to get the affection and the love that I was actually seeking, then it suppressed the kind of feelings. But my body was actually sort of saying, no, this isn't right. It's going too fast. You want to be more in control. So me then throwing up was the kind of way to demonstrate that. Now, the good thing is that I've actually been able to, I've enjoyed driving. I love road trips. If I'm behind the wheel, I'm totally in control. But if I was a passenger, I would start feeling unwell. Not that I would always end up throwing up, but I certainly would feel really uncomfortable. There were certain situations where I had to be sitting behind the driver to feel more in control, so then I wouldn't feel unwell, which is not always the way that you can actually do it. If you're the only passenger in the car, sitting behind the driver is not an appropriate place to actually be in. And that motion sickness then cascaded onto boats. I couldn't be on boats either. The motion just seemed to trigger this inability for me to be able to sort of control how I was actually feeling internally, to the point that I wasn't it was excruciatingly painful to be on a ferry or a boat, and I would have to be up on the deck and I probably would be throwing up at the side of it. But at the same time, I couldn't be left behind when there was family holidays and we were going on a boat. But certainly as an adult, then it made me, I avoided traveling on a boat. And because a couple of road trips that I actually did as a teenager, where we travelled via bus from Greece to Scotland, we had to do the North Sea ferry, and that is always extremely rocky, which then just intensified those kind of feelings of not feeling well. Now, as part of our kind of final assessment for the rapid transformational therapy training, you were to do a reflective practice. So you were being the therapist for a client, and then a client was being a therapist for you the next session. So you were doing an exchange, and then you were reviewing and providing feedback for each other. And for me, it was a fellow colleague of mine that I had met in Rushden, but very, very kind of briefly. And then we ended up being reflective partners, and motion sickness was something that I wanted to tackle. And this is where, through that work, it brought up that it was this kind of lack of control, that the pace and speed that we were actually moving. And the great kind of news for that was we had the session, and literally a few days later I was able, so I hadn't even listened to the recording, and I was able to go on a bus, and I felt totally fine. I didn't feel any kind of motion sickness whatsoever. And then a few weeks later, when I had started listening to the recording for the kind of 21 days, I think I was on day 11, and I booked myself on a boat trip just within the Firth of Forth to go under the 3 bridges and have that experience, because I wanted to actually see, can I go on a boat and can I enjoy being on a boat? Because a cruise is something that I've always had on my bucket list, but because of my previous experiences, I thought that that is one thing that I would never be able to score off my bucket list. So with 11 days of listening to the recording, I was able to go on a boat cruise for an hour and a half, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was smiling and having fun the entire time. The seas were not the calmest, but they weren't also the roughest, but it certainly wasn't a glass kind of water on the river that we were sort of like going about. So from that kind of perspective, it just shows the power of our brain to be able to control our thoughts, our feelings, and how our experiences that we're actually having. So I know that now that a cruise is definitely on the bucket list, and it is something that I'm definitely looking into exploring over the next year or two, to sort of like, because Antarctica is, Patagonia is an area that I've always wanted to go and visit. And that is a cruise that I would love to do, but I want to maybe do a shorter cruise in between doing that bigger cruise, to sort of like prove that I can genuinely go and enjoy it, because I don't want to just survive being on the boat. I want to actually enjoy being on the boat. So it just goes to show that there are tools that we can actually use that can have such a profound, long-lasting effect, and it is tapping into your subconscious. Now, that motion sickness was literally one session. It was a 2-hour session of us going through, revisiting some scenes, reframing and letting go of the stuff that was no longer serving me, and then installing the new belief. When it came to the perimenopause, that was 2 sessions, but the session on anxiety was just one. The second session that we had was for improving my sleep and my bladder control. So for me, the anxiety was dealt with within 1 session. And then also the rejection and the abandonment feeling, that was something that we sort of tackled in the first session. So I've not needed to have multiple sessions for the same underlying issue that needed to be addressed. But on the self-reflection work that I've been doing, where I've been doing the inner child work and doing the codependency work, it's flagging up that a lot of these different experiences that I've had are all interconnected. So it's about chipping away the layers, and you could just have 1 session and it can let it go. But it's about it's understanding how many things do you want to sort of like tackle, and then it's like, how do you want to tackle that work? So what I'm trying to say is that you could have 1 session that deals with just 1 issue and it resolves it, but depending on how your conscious brain is willing to take on board the new beliefs, then it might work faster. So I've had some clients where it's taken 2 sessions and in some instances 3 sessions for the beliefs to start becoming familiar. And this is where our brain is conditioned to seek the familiar and the known, even if it is not something that is actually benefiting it, because it's primal survival, and it requires repetition for you to be able to rewire and change the way that you're actually thinking. But if you are up to do the work and you're willing to listen to the recording for 21 days and just keep pushing through, then you could have that transformation in just 1 session. But certainly over 3 sessions, you would transform your life. Okay, I'm going to bring it to a close here. Thank you very much for listening, and hopefully within this you're actually seeing that, yeah, maybe there are some things that you could be working with, and their RTT is potentially an option that you may have never thought of previously. If you want to know more, check out my website. I've got the details below, and feel free to watch more kind of content within this channel if you feel inclined and you resonate with what I'm actually sharing, because there might be some tools and techniques that you can actually use on your conscious brain and you can do the work yourself. But if you feel that you're coming up against the same blockers time and time again, and you know that is deeper rooted work that you might be unaware of or blind, but your gut's telling you there is something else, then please feel free to reach out. I offer 20-minute exploration calls to see if it's something that would work for you. I create a bespoke package for your specific needs to fit around your kind of circumstances, and depending on what we're actually working with, there'll be different kind of package prices. So if you want to know more, please feel free to book a call, which is all available on my website. Okay, I'm going to bring it to a close. Thank you once again. If you liked, like and subscribe, and go out and seize the day. Have the most amazing day. And always remember, there's choices in life, so choose wisely. Until the next one, bye.